Welcome back to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. The archives and load up some other talks that I've got of these Bob Earll cassettes. I've had them sitting on a hard drive for some time now. I've decided to share them with you all. Let me know what you think. Some people loved Bob. Some people hated Bob. Bob was Bob, but he talked all over the world. I mean, he's from Los Angeles, Beverly Hills area, and did other things. I think he was a writer. Just click down below, like or subscribe, or both, like and subscribe. Just click down below, like and subscribe on my channel. It helps me out. Just a little click for you, doesn't cost you anything, and I'm bringing you some Bob Earll. And have a good day if you want to.
I am Bob, and I am an addict and an alcoholic. I like that. Please understand that the size of the bucket is an indication as to the amount they want.
God, what a great guy. He was so funny.
They gave me this preserving our fellowship, our challenge, as a theme. And I think it's a great theme. But from my own personal perspective, the word preserving makes me nervous. You know, that's kind of like you put it in a jar, put a little wax on top of it, and take it off the shelf in 20 years and it's still the same. And I would just hate like hell to see that. I think that Alcoholics Anonymous is a vital and growing organization. I think one of the most important lines in the big book is God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. I believe God has, and I believe a lot of people refuse to listen to the new information that's available to all of us out there. Our founders, particularly Bill, was what one might say is open-minded, and even drug Dr. Bob along for part of the trip. I mean, at least he got him playing a Ouija board, for God's sakes. In the early days, for all we know, that's how much of what we do today was decided. Well, what do you think of this, Bob? Oh, hell, I don't know, Bill. Let's get the board and see if it works. And now we have members willing to die over it, you know, and they would... They'd just get the Ouija board out again and see if it still held true, if it was still an accurate belief. I'd love a glass that I could put some of this water in. If somebody could just get me a glass. Oh, great, thanks. The 90s. Okay. Well, I'm pretty typical to an awful lot of people who reside in our meetings everywhere in the world, in that I came out of a home with one alcoholic and one non-alcoholic. I now know, based on an awful lot of work and time that I've put into finding out about me, that can have a tremendous impact on a human being. Growing up in a home where there's an alcoholic, and my mother, who was the non-alcoholic, was the child beater. I, unfortunately, was the only child in the family, and took the full brunt of her rage over my father's drinking. My father was too busy drinking to protect me. My mother was the kind of fist-using, back-of-the-hand child beater who broke my nose, ripped out the corner of my eyes, knocked some teeth out, tore out the corners of my lips. Basically did a good job on me as a little boy. I'm lucky for the school system, and because eventually she had to stop. I remember once looking at a report card at her house in my first year of school, and there was a note that I'd missed so much school they weren't giving me any grades. And I had no conscious memory of that time at the beatings, and I said to my mom, I said, what about this report card? I mean, how come they didn't give me a grade? Why did I miss so much school? She said, I don't know, I think you were sick. That was it. That was the answer. And it was okay with me. That's perfectly acceptable for me, because for me to look for the deeper answer to my pain means I've got to feel the pain. To just accept her response that I was sick makes it a lot easier on me for the moment. School system wasn't any better for me. because of the amount of tension that I lived under as a child at home, I was slow and careful about answering questions. I learned early on you just don't want to answer quick because you can get absolutely dropped right where you stand for even giving the right answer, you know. So the second grade was where it began to fall apart for me with Mrs. Cooney. Now the second grade for me was 53 years ago. I still remember Mrs. Cooney. Large, big black corrective shoes, hair in a bun. It was sort of a cheap facelift, you know, just kind of pulled her. And angry. And God knows how I feared angry women. Her single most important question in my life, I think, in school was 2 + 2. She went up to a blackboard and she put a 2 on it, put a 2 under it, put up a plus sign, drew a line underneath, and spun on me and said, "Bobby?" Oh, no. Now, I know the answer. I know the answer. I know 2 and 2 are 4. I know the answer. I got it. But coming from the environment that I'm living in, there's so much tension. There's some things I have to work out before I answer this question for this woman. The single most important thing I must resolve for myself is, why does she want to know? You know? Once I've convinced myself that it's part of her job description that she elicit from me proof that I am in fact retaining the information she's dispensing, I move on to problem 2. Does she know the answer? Children, as a rule, will judge the outside world based by what's going on at home. I'm being asked questions by parents who don't know the answer to the question that they're asking. I'm giving them a correct response, and I'm getting knocked down anyway. So I'm very gun-shy about, just because you're big does not mean, there's no indication to me that you know the answer to the question you're asking. It takes me a long time to work these things out, and while I'm working these things out, as a rule, you're going to have more than one child in a class who's being raised in an alcoholic home. And we did have in our class. We had Susie. She was the family hero. This girl, I would guess, got straight A's throughout school. I would also assume, I have no idea, I didn't keep track of it, she went on and got more credentials than she can use between now and when she dies. Because Susie's role in life was to make up for the fact that the Christmas lights were still on their house in July. And that our society, sadly enough, supports the concept that her family believed as long as they could hold up this report card of Susie's and it had all A's on it, this is an indication that they're an okay family, because if they weren't an okay family, their child couldn't get all A's. Therefore, it fell to Susie to get these grades and keep them up, because the entire esteem of her family rested on her shoulders. Man, that's a big unspoken burden for a child to carry. So while I was trying to work this out, Susie couldn't stand it any longer, jumped up out of her seat, 4 fingers up in the air, and said, 4! Okay, one more time. You know, a note goes home with Bobby about being slow and uncooperative. I had a high IQ, and in those days they had very little information about attention deficit. So if you had a high IQ and you were slow, at least in my case, they perceived my slowness to be intentional. So they thought I was just jerking them around. Therefore, I was not a troubled child that needed help. I was a bad child that needed discipline. That was their perception of me. So one more note goes home about how I'm screwing around, and Susie's the hero. I have one more problem now. I spend all of recess trying to figure out how to take Susie's life. I don't react well to public humiliation at all. Embarrassing me is something you never really want to do. Well, you see, what she had done was the thing that I live in fear of, and I'd lived in fear of ever since I can consciously remember. I have never felt okay. I never felt okay. I've never been comfortable in my body. I always felt inadequate and insufficient, not enough, kind of incomplete, kind of like there's a little spot down here inside of me, like a little bubbling pot of sewage. And that my whole role in life is to make sure you never, ever see this little bubbling pot of sewage that I hide. Because I'm not very good if you really get to know me. See, that's my belief. That's what I believe to be true. And Susie had drawn attention to the fact that I was not okay. And my fear has always been, if you ever see that I'm not okay, if you ever see that little pot of sewage, one of three things will happen. You will make me go away. You will go away. You will draw the attention of others to it and embarrassment. And that pretty much was my school life. I was slow. I was always in trouble. Notes were always going home with me to parents who didn't care whether I brought home notes or not. And the only thing that changed in my entire educational experience was I hit about 6 feet around 13. And at that point, I no longer had to listen to my instructors. If you embarrassed me in your classroom or you asked me questions I didn't like, I would walk by your desk, drop all the books in the wastebasket, make some socially unacceptable gesture, and walk out the door. And you had already been instructed by the vice principal not to send me to his office again ever, because I'd put a chair through his window day one, you know. I had a little bad attitude, and nobody bothered to find out why was this boy so angry. What on God's earth could have made this 15-year-old boy, this 13-year-old boy, so mad? So completely just in a rage. When I was 15, they finally asked me to leave. Well, actually what they did, I was in Los Angeles in high school. I was in manual arts, which had as many murders going on in the 50s as it has going on now. I liked it. I was comfortable there. Worked for me. But I didn't work for them. So they sent me to a high school that used to exist in the city of Los Angeles. It was called Reese. It was for troubled young men like me. I'm almost convinced there was not one educational credential among any of the instructors in this school. As far as any of us knew, they were all either currently employed as juvenile police officers or they were retired juvenile police officers. Their job was simply keep us there for the day and then turn us out. That basically was it. To give you an idea as to my attitude at that time, at 15 years of age, and I have not had a drink yet, and I've not used any drugs yet, I was lasted in that school one day. At the end of one day in that school, they called my mother and told her they did not want me in the Los Angeles City school system for any reason. And I was asked to leave. For good, forever. They didn't even want me in the part-time go on Saturday part of it. And they said, get him a job. 2 days later, I'm down at the beach, in Hermosa Beach, or Manhattan, down there somewhere, hanging out with some friends of mine, and somebody gave me a marijuana cigarette to smoke and a large jug of red wine to wash it down with. Now, how many people in this room can identify with what happened next? I felt okay for the first time in my life. I felt okay. I was comfortable in my body. I didn't feel inadequate or insufficient or like there was a little bubbling pot of sewage. I kind of stood up a little straighter. My senses got sharper. Girls took on a whole new interest all of a sudden. You know, it's like everything just kind of came alive. I could hear the music. No, not hear the music. I could feel the music. I could feel the music. The ocean became magical instead of just this large thing sitting out there making noise. I came alive. And this is the magic that happened. My feelings were altered by my first contact with alcohol and with drugs. It changed how I felt. Almost everybody I hear talk in the time I've been sober, they say the same thing. That first drink, that first little bout with drugs, and it changed. Magic happened. I got to tell you, the first 3 years for me were delightful. They were terrific. It was the best 3 years of my life. I got so I could put together exactly the combination of drugs and alcohol to create exactly the mood I wanted for the moment. It was like a mad pharmacist, just sitting there at my little table. That's how I used to get my drugs. I used to take down pharmaceutical warehouses. And I'd just sit there and put together this combination of a little of this and a little of that and a little of this and leave and knowing exactly how I was going to feel in about 6 minutes, you know, when the wave came over me. And hopefully I wouldn't be driving at the time, you know, when it hit. And it was good, and I felt okay, and I felt alive, and everything was all right. I'd still be out there. If it still worked like that, I imagine I'd still be out there. How many of you identify with what happened next? About 3 years and 1 day in, I put together the magic combination that was supposed to put me in a really mellow, laid-back, quiet, kind of calm mood. And I went right out through the roof, ready to kill. It didn't work. And I tried something else, and it didn't work. And I tried something else, and it didn't work. And so what had happened to me is this very thing that had saved my life turned on me. I couldn't get it to work anymore. And the next 8 years for me, I used to describe it as the first 3 years of my drinking and my using were like driving a fine automobile down the high road of life, you know? Just cruising, man, booking it in a Rolls down the interstate. It was good. The next 8 years were like being handcuffed to the bumper of the car, being drugged down the high road of life. Actually, that happened to me once near the end. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department handcuffed me to the rear bumper of one of their cars and drugged me around the block. Something to do with getting the word out in the neighborhood about how people with a certain attitude would be treated in the future. God, I hated being the example, you know? I don't know why I couldn't have just been one of the guys in the park watching it go by and say, well, there goes poor Fred, man. Look at him. He's really getting banged up there. But the upside of it is they don't take you to jail after that because they don't want no pictures of you. 26 years of age, 1962, I wound up weighing 135 pounds. I weigh about 195 now, if you want to know what I look like at 135. Living in doorways. That was it. Brains were gone. I'm telling you, gone. Boy, I was just fried. There was nothing left. I was a skinny, worn out, completely insane, destroyed human being. Unable to ask for help. Absolutely unable to ask for help. I grew up in an environment and in a neighborhood and with people and ran the streets with people. Help was not even considered a word, man. If you were bleeding, you didn't ask for help. You just say to your partners, man, I'm going to get a rag. I'll be back in a minute, you know. I'll take care of this. You didn't ask for help no matter what. My last arrest, because I was such a high roller and such a classy act out there, was common drunk, place of arrest, main floor, city jail, Los Angeles. I had shown up drunk to serve weekends and they arrested me. Somehow some of the flash and glamour was gone from my career. It just wasn't as colorful as it had been. This was not a 10-day run deep into the heart of Mexico to bring back narcotics. This was just drunk on the main floor of the city jail. That was it. Went before a judge. Had to go back before the judge that had originally sentenced me. This was not thrilling. This is failure to execute a sentence. Can be compounded into a felony. I could have been bye-bye for a long time on just this simple, dumb, stupid little drunk. But it made sense to me. So many things made sense to me. We used to have a saying years ago about sponsoring people that don't ever worry about talking to us about your problems because your problems do not upset us. It is your solutions to your problems that absolutely terrify us, you know? My solution is often someone should die, you know? So I say to this judge, knowing I'm going away for a long time, I'll give you an insight into this judge. The guy before me gives him 10 days to be served on 5 weekends in the county jail. The guy says, Your Honor, if you don't mind, I'd just soon do 10 days straight and get it over with. And this judge looked down at him and said, well, son, I was trying to have a little consideration for your wife, your children, and your employer. But seeing as how you don't have any consideration for them, I'm going to give you the 10 and 170 to do on top of them so that maybe you'll get a little consideration for your wife, your family, your children. So I'm next.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think.
There are a few times in my life I did not have a fuck you attitude, and this was one of them. I was really open-minded at this moment. They could have offered me any program in the world. I'd been ready to go, no matter what it was. I said to this judge, I said, Your Honor, I have a drinking problem. She said, I realize that. I said, I'm going to call AA and do something about my drinking. I don't know where the hell I heard about AA, but I knew it existed. And he got this big smile on his face. And he said, good. He said, I'm happy for you. He said, AA is a great thing. He said, and for the first time in your life, you can become a useful member of this society. He said, you'll make new friends. You'll find a great life. He said, I know this to be true because I got a brother that's been sober 9 years. I left that courtroom thinking, wow. And I went back to Pasadena where I was living, and I cut this ad out of the personal column in the newspaper, which was Alcoholics Anonymous and the phone number. And I took that ad and a dime to the payphone 30 times. Couldn't call. Could not call. I don't have the ability to ask for help. I couldn't call somebody I didn't know in an office somewhere that I had never seen and say, I can't make it. I need your help. I am going to die if I don't get your help. Not me. Not me. I won't even bore you with the gory stories of the lengths that they went to just try to get me to sweep the floor. Well, when I was about 2 years, so I got to come forward and tell a little story so I can back up and get the rest of this. When I was a couple of years sober in AA, I'd had a lot of trouble with God, grasping a concept of God. And it happened early on at an early meeting. I was talking to somebody in a corner, and we have monitors at AA meetings. In case you haven't encountered them yet, their role is to give advice in conversations that they're not included in and haven't been asked. But they are appointed at a secret meeting somewhere. I just wish the hell they'd start wearing armbands so we could see them coming. You know, sort of. So I'm talking to this guy about something, I don't know what the hell it was. He says, and this old guy just walks up and sticks his nose right in the middle of our conversation and says, that was going on in my life, son, I'd turn it over. I liked the sound of that. That had a nice ring to it, turn it over. I hadn't heard it yet in a meeting. I hadn't been going to many meetings. I said, to who? He said, God. I have no formal religious training, none. I said, who's God? He said, God is your father. Bad image. Didn't work for me. Gave me no sense of hope, whatever. My father was a man who was absolutely disconnected from his only son. My father was a man I could have done anything in the world, and I did do most things in the world, and couldn't get his attention whether it was good or whether it was bad. It didn't matter if I'd shot some son of a bitch down in the street in a drug deal gone bad, or if I had pulled somebody out of the front of a moving car, of which I've done both things. Didn't matter. I couldn't get his attention. When I was a little boy, I couldn't smile big enough. I couldn't laugh hard enough. I couldn't be sweet enough to get him to pick me up and tell me he loved me. So don't give me the father as an image and expect me to go rushing forward and say, oh boy, this is terrific. Let me turn it over to this concept. So a couple of years in, I was having a small problem. I was sober, but I was nuts. But I still couldn't get with this God thing. I mean, surrendering or turning it over just wouldn't get it. And I couldn't, my sponsors kept trying to, they would talk to me all the time about it. And I just was, yeah, man, One night I heard a guy at a meeting tell a story which gave me a concept of God that I still love today, and it's many, many years later. It was a story about two guys drinking in a bar in Alaska. One of them was a very religious man, and the other one was an atheist. And eventually their conversation swung around to God. And the atheist looked at this religious man and he said, I gave your God a chance to prove himself to me once, and he didn't do it. And the religious man says, oh, really? In what manner did you give God a chance to prove himself? Atheist says, well, about 6 months ago, I was lost about 150 miles north of town. I knelt down in the snow in a blizzard, in a terrible blizzard, he said. And I knelt down in the snow, and I looked up at the sky. I said, God, if there is one, I'm lost and I'm going to die. Religious man looks at him, smiles a very knowing smile, says, well, you must believe you're here. He said, nah, some damn Eskimo came along, showed me the way back to town. That clicked for me, see, because my sponsors had been telling me for 2 years up to that point that God lived inside of me. Unacceptable to me. God was good, and what was inside of me was not good. It was not acceptable to me that God would reside in me. Not in here, not in this person. But I listened to this story, I thought, well, that's it, man, I got it. God's instrument is people. People. And the right people show up at the right time to move me to the next appointed place in my life, if I let them and pay attention. Some of this requires that you be present at the moment this happens. Or that you not be so obsessed with who the Eskimo should be that you miss the one that shows up. Okay, back to Pasadena, 1962, sitting in my doorway with my dime and my ad, and I cannot make this call. Cannot make this call. I am going to die in the streets of Pasadena at 26 years of age. Guaranteed. Sitting in my doorway one day, and there's this shadow over me, and I look up, and here's this guy I'd known for a long time. Him and his wife and 6 kids had been on welfare ever since I'd known him, and I'd given him a ton of money. And he said to me, hey, you know what, man, if you don't have a place to stay, you can come stay with me and my wife and our kids. And you know what? It was okay to go with him. See? Because he owed me. He probably owed me $5,000, which in 1962 was a considerable amount of money. It was his duty to take me out of that doorway. He owed it to me to get me the hell off the streets and take me home. I could go with him. This wasn't about asking for help. This was about somebody paying me back what they owed me. He and his wife and 6 kids lived in this cockroach-infested one-bedroom apartment about 3 blocks from the doorway I was living in. That night I'm sitting on the floor and I'm shaking and falling apart, and I said to him, I said, oh man, one of these days I've got to call that AA and do something about my drinking. He said, hell, there's a girl down the hall goes to AA. In 1962, I couldn't even conceive of what a girl in AA looked like. I mean, Gravel Gertie came to mind. You know? It was like, God, what would get a woman to the program? But I was curious enough to find out. You know, God sometimes uses my best key character defects to his benefit and mine. So down the hall I go, knock on the door, and this is my introduction to AA, which is why I just almost get hysterical to the point of injuring myself laughing when we start getting cautious about what we say to the newcomer. Girl that opened this door stood about 6'2", weighed about 235 pounds. She was big enough to break every bone in my body. She had short black hair, tattoos down both arms, both legs. This is 1962. And a half full pint of booze in her hand. This is my introduction to AA, people. And I've been sober ever since. I looked at her, I could talk to her. This is street people. This is one of my family. I said, I'm curious about this AA thing. She just looked me right in the eyes. She said, AA will work if you want it, and I am not ready to quit drinking. Made perfect sense to me. You know, I took one look at her, I thought, God damn, if I was your size and had your strength, I'd go right back out there too, you know. But I'm just kind of short and shriveled up and hanging here by a thread, you know. She'd felt a responsibility for the sobriety she had, so she stuck me in her car, took me to a meeting, introduced me to some guy, and left. I've never seen her since, and I owe her my life. I owe her my life, and I've never seen her since. I always try and tell that story, hoping someday she'll come up out of the back of the room somewhere. And I can say, thank you for 33 years, man, of magic, you know? And anyway, okay, so now I'm in AA. This is about like being in school. I got the same attitude about AA as I had about school. You know, I'm in a room full of people in Pasadena, all look like marks to me, but the only thing they're good for is taking their money. You know, it's like, took one look and said, well, okay, there's some money here. And I went to one meeting, they served finger sandwiches, for God's sake, to Pasadena, which was okay. I liked the meeting because you know, at least I ate at that meeting. They said, if you want what we have, I thought, let's not get carried away here, man, you know. I didn't have any concept of what was here, but I didn't want any of it. But I, you know, just went from meeting to meeting for about 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I had 3 weeks, I guess it was 3 weeks. Can't even remember now anymore. My memory's going to hell. 2 weeks, I guess. Anyway, I was asked to give a 10-minute talk. Now, many of you will hear in your local meetings in whatever area you're from, a lot of people recently, well, over the years it's always been the case, but it seems more recently there's real energy, a real fervor behind this, don't get emotionally involved. I, conversely, am one of the people that support that, getting emotionally involved. I think it probably gets you closer to your sponsor the first year than anything you can do. Just get in a relationship and you'll spend a lot of time with your sponsor. It's been said for us to get into a relationship is like putting fertilizer on our character defects and shortcomings. Anyway, 2 weeks in, I'm asked to give this 10-minute talk. I give my little 10-minute talk, and there was a girl, I had 3 weeks, there was a girl in the audience, had 2-3 months. The story's true, so help me God. Her sponsor told her, if you hear it, just want to give you an insight into her mental health at the moment that we met. Her sponsor told her, if you hear anything you like at an AA meeting, take it home. I have no idea what the hell I said, but it worked for her, you know. Most of it was probably lies because I could see no sense in telling the truth and, you know, admitting anything. So she took me home. This was the beginning of a relationship for she and I. About a week after we got together, she had a complete mental breakdown, landed in a private psychiatric hospital. I did not yet have a sponsor. I didn't know what the hell to do, but I felt responsible. Oh, did I feel responsible? That's the time you want some drugs, man, so you don't have to feel responsible, you know. So I went and visited her every day in this swanky private psychiatric hospital, took the big book. We'd sit and I sat and took her get well cards every day, too, which I realize is not what you do for people with mental problems, but I didn't know it at the time. It made sense to me. So we'd sit by the swimming pool in this swanky psych ward, hold hands, read the big book, plan the rest of our lives together with God, AA, and the 12 steps. We had a rather volatile relationship that went on for about 18 months. We separated about 6, 7, 8 times. I can't remember. I know next to the last time I was with her, both of my sponsors said to me, if you go back to her one more time, we'll never speak to you again. Well, I'm not the person to say that to, you know. That's like guaranteed I'm going back. And I did. Anyway, we eventually split up, and then we didn't see each other for about 10 years after that. We just had no contact. One time I went out to Burbank, California to speak, and I walked in the Alano Club at a Sunday morning meeting, and she was clear across the room in the corner. She spotted me, I spotted her, and we went for each other like a Clairol ad, you know, like running through the field. We wrapped our arms around each other, and simultaneously we said the same thing. We both said, thank you for being part of saving my life. Because 10 years later, as we look back, that's both the impression that we had. That's the impression we both had. See, because I finally understood after some of the smoke had cleared and settled down that she helped keep me alive. She was as much an Eskimo in my life from God as the guy that took me out of the doorway or the woman that took me to my first meeting. You know, we're so quick to make judgments on what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's bad. And there's a story. Maybe I'll tell about that, because that's a killer when we start making judgments about stuff. This woman saved my life. I didn't trust anybody, nobody. She trusted everybody. Neither one is necessarily good state of mind for AA. But she was weak and needed help, see? So I saw that we went to a meeting every day for her. I saw that we read the big book every night for her. I saw we read the 12 and 12 every morning for her. I saw we read the guilt-instilling 24-hour-a-day book every day for her. Well, it may not affect you that way. I almost killed myself behind that book, man. It would just seem it'd be the worst possible message the next morning after I'd done something really terrible, you know. I probably had used excessive masturbation as a form of meditation, and then I'd get up and take that little black book and it'd say, "Are you a good AA?" You know, it's like, it's like, no, I guess the choice here is to just kill myself, because only decent thing after all this, you know. There was a guy, a little villager, lived high in the mountains in a little country in Europe, a little tiny country many, many years ago. And he had this great white horse. Magnificent, magnificent animal. It was envy of people for miles and miles and miles around. One day the horse ran away. And all the villagers rushed out to his place and they said to him, "Oh God, how terrible, how awful, your horse has run away." He says, "I don't know that it's awful. I just know he's gone." About 3 days later, the horse came back and brought 6 other horses with it. And the villagers rushed back out and said, "Wow, you were right. It wasn't awful. It was great. He brought back 6 more horses. How terrific." He said, "I don't know it's terrific. I just know he brought back 6 more horses." In the process of trying to break these horses so they could be sold, his only son was thrown off the horse and broke both of his legs. And the villagers ran out again and they said, "Oh my God, you're right. It wasn't a good thing he brought the horses back. It was a terrible thing. Your son got his legs broken." He said, "I don't know that this is a terrible thing. I only know that my son's legs are broken." About a week later, this little tiny country went to war with the country on its border, which is 10 times its size, and they came through the small villages gathering the young men to take them to the front to almost certain death. But they couldn't take his son because both of his son's legs were broken. And one more time, the villagers rush out to him and they say, "Oh my God, you're right. It wasn't a bad thing. His legs were broken. It was a good thing because now he does not have to go off to the war." He said, "I do not know that it's a good thing. I just know he does not have to go off to the war." I mean, and the story goes on and on and on and on. And in early sobriety, making judgments kept me a prisoner. You know, that's good, that's bad, that's good, that's... No, it just is. It just is. And the guy next to me may not do it my way. Doesn't make him wrong, doesn't make me wrong. Just means there's a lot of ways here to do this program. A lot of ways to stay sober. Early sobriety for me became really interesting. I had a small problem. I got some sponsors finally. They were cruel, vicious, abusive, and exactly what I needed. Worked for me, you know. Sit down, shut up, listen, if you knew anything, you've done, you know, just on and on. They're raging this stuff at me while standing underneath a sign that says, "We care." I went up to my first sponsor. He was speaking at a meeting. He was an ex-cop, ex-convict, ex-mental patient. I mean, that's how he used to start his talk. I'm an ex-cop, ex-convict, ex-mental patient, ex-husband, ex-this. He'd list all the things he was an ex of. So I went up to him afterwards. I said, "I need a sponsor very bad." He said, "Well, tell me a little about yourself." So I did. And he said, "Well, I'm not the guy, but I'll turn you over to the guy." So he turned me over to a madman. A guy that had been a boss con in Folsom Penitentiary for a lot of years. He was probably the first human being I ever met in my life that I actually was afraid of. And he got that, I think, because he used to often threaten me with breaking my back when you set the chairs up at the meeting or I break your back. Simple program, just... So I hung out with my sponsors, went to meetings, made coffee, set up chairs, mopped floors, swept floors. They give you people to sponsor. They were sadistic. I don't know if they're as sadistic now as they were then. They'd give you these guys that had been around AA for 14 years, never drawn a sober breath, and could recite the big book from cover to cover. And you got about 4 weeks, and this is the guy they give you to pick up and take to the meeting. It's like, what the hell are you going to say to him? I mean, he knows the book backwards and forwards. The guy's been around AA 14 years. He's got babies sober longer than you are. It's like... But it must have worked, because I'm still here. Got 6 months, they gave me a panel in the county hospital. This was not fun. I have a little thing about germs. I didn't do well at that hospital panel. Those people want to shake hands with you. I won't even go into the nightmare that hospital panel was for me. But, again, it's the same old thing. You go, you show up, or you die. So it's like, I showed up. Got jobs, became employable, had to lie to get my first job, but I got it. I had tried the honesty, I really took it to heart. I'd been so dishonest for so long. The concept of honesty had a nice ring to it, to me. And I couldn't get a job, and finally I went up to my sponsor and I said, "You know what, man, I've filled out 110 job applications, and I am not getting work here." And he said, "And what is the problem?" I said, "The problem is," it says, "have you ever been arrested?" And I put yes, and it says, "If so, please explain." And I said, "I explain, I get more paper from them, and I continue to explain, So this mountain looks at me and says, "I'm talking about self-honesty." He said, "Are you willing to give a guy 8 hours worth of work for 8 hours of pay?" I even had to think about that for a minute, which is embarrassing. I said, "Yeah." He said, "Now go get a job." So next place I went, I put no. Never been arrested. But they hired me, so I had a job. I also had a little problem. Every day somebody would walk out into the factory in a suit from the office. I knew it was over. I knew they had run a check because I was working for a company that bonded their employees. And I knew at some point, I'm history. Finally, the pressure of that became so great I couldn't stand it any longer. So again, back to my sponsor. I said, "Man, they don't know I've ever been arrested, and I can't do this anymore. I'm crazy." He said, well, why don't you tell them? Now they know you're a good employee. Of all the solutions I had come up with, and I had many, that was not one of them. So I made an appointment with the director of personnel, going in his office, sat down, said, I got a little something I got to tell you. And so I told him everything I had to tell him, and I found out I was working for a company that made it a point to hire 2 to 4 ex-convicts every year. Just to be responsible to the community. And I don't want to tell you the amount of mental anguish I went through before I ever went in that man's office. The kind that wakes you up at 3 in the morning, So I did all those things, and I'm cruising along through this sobriety. I only have one little problem. Each day I continue to stay sober, I get crazier. No exception. I wake up every morning crazier than I was the morning before. But the thing I'm noticing in meetings is that no one else is crazy. In fact, if anything, they are the opposite of crazy. They're fine. No matter what you ask them, they're fine. People looking like they're actually are laying on a bed of nails. How are you? Susan. Fine, thanks. Some guy comes through the door of the meeting and he's lost his job and his wife left him, and the greeter says, hey, how are you? I'm fine, thanks. Well, to somebody who already doesn't feel complete, I have to emulate you in order to be okay. See, because I don't want to be different, and I don't want to look different, and I don't want you to get it that I'm different from you, because there was no one talking about honoring the differences in us. It was all about the unity of us. I remember Chuck used to say, oh, you put all the alcoholics in a paper sack, shake it up, pull one out, you got it. Bullshit. Absolutely not true. You may have the disease, but you don't have the person. You don't have the individual. You don't have whatever it's going to take for them to recover. You may have some concept of how the disease has affected their life, but that's all you really have. So I didn't want to be different, so I wouldn't tell anybody that I wasn't okay. One particular problem seemed to be anger. And it seemed to come out in the car. I could do my morning spiritual reading and be in really a good place and then go down and start the car and something would just happen. I don't know what. Turn that key and I would transform. Within yards of my driveway, someone would have failed to have read the booklet as to what this small lever on the left side of their steering wheel was for, and they will have moved over in front of me, neglecting to use the little lever on the left side of their steering wheel, which would then result in a 100-mile-an-hour chase down the freeway system, with me with my head hanging out the window, screaming obscenities, foam coming out of my mouth like a rabid dog. If we were lucky, I didn't catch them. If we were unlucky, I was standing on their hood at the end of an off-ramp on the freeway system, trying to explain to them what the little turn signal was for on the left side of their steering wheel. And they would never get out to the car to talk to me, and I couldn't figure that out. And one of the things I learned to do is get guilty quick in my early sobriety. So while standing in the hood of the car, I could hear my sponsor's voice saying, on any given occasion, you may be the only example of AA a man will ever see. Then I go home, read the 24-hour-a-day book, and suicide would seem like the only possible end to that day. I would finish this chase on the freeway, pull into the parking lot outside the meeting, wipe all the foam off my mouth, get out of my car, walk into the meeting, the guy at the door say, hey, Bob, how are you, man? I said, I'm fine, thanks. What's a little high-speed chase among friends? You know? But at the same time this is going on, I'm having a reoccurring dream and a reoccurring fantasy that's driving me crazy because I'm going to these meetings and everybody in the damn room is okay but me. And I'm getting crazier and crazier, and I'm going to more meetings, sponsoring more people, driving to more institutions, carrying more panels. I'm getting so busy, man, I can't even got time to brush my teeth. Because that was the answer given, you know, do more, do more, do more, do more. And I'm doing more, and I'm just as nuts, just as crazy. I know today, I can tell you what was happening, but I didn't know then. What was happening was the feelings that I had been repressing for 26 years were coming back. Having no idea what feelings were, are, what you do with them, I interpreted feelings as insanity. Because feelings to me represented being out of control. If I give in to these feelings, I'm going to lose control of myself. And if I lose control of myself, I'm completely insane. There's no hope for me. That's the greatest fear in the world I had, losing control. Don't ever give up control. My very life used to depend on control. I'm an old armed robber. If there's one thing you must do when it's going down, is be in control of yourself and everybody else who's within, you know, within sight. So I started having this fantasy about following a car down the freeway system. And this car would have a wife and a husband and 2 or 3 children in it. And suddenly at a high speed it would veer off, crash into a concrete abutment, and burst into flames. And I would stop my car behind and I'd jump out and I'd run over and I'd pull the wife from the car and maybe a couple of the kids, but the husband wouldn't make it and maybe one of the other children wouldn't make it. And then I'd be there on the 11 o'clock news at night with my hair kind of singed and burned and sort of my face black and my arms bandaged from reaching in the fire, and they'd be saying what a hero I was. And I'd be saying, no, I just, you know, did what anybody would do under these circumstances. So finally, that haunted me so much once I sat one of my sponsors down and said, I got to tell you about this thing, man. It's just consuming me. And it got so bad. He said, it's about your ego. Didn't sound right, but I don't know what you do with your sponsors, but I did it with mine. I always go, oh, okay, got it, okay. You know. And then walk off thinking their skin should fall from their bones. Then I started to fly on airplanes, and the fantasy changed. The plane would go down. And I'd crawl up and down the aisles of the plane, and I'd be pulling people down the plane and sending them down the slide and getting them out of the fire. And then again, when it was all over, there I'd be again on the 11 o'clock news, hair all burned, face black, arms bandaged, and they're saying what a hero I am. I'm saying, no, I just did what everybody else would do under similar circumstances. I had to wait till I was 19 years sober to find out what the hell that was all about. When I was 19 years sober, with the help of a therapist, we worked that little sucker out. See, I was in so much pain. I was in so much pain sober, doing everything I was told to do, but the pain was there, that all I wanted was to be in some kind of situation. Because I consider being burned the worst pain there is. I've been shot, I've been stabbed, and I've been burned, and I'll tell you, man, being burned is the worst to me. All I wanted is some external indication for you as to how bad I hurt. And the reason I wanted to save people is I wanted you to know I'm really a good guy. I really am just a good guy, and I hurt awful bad. That's what I was about. That was what I was praying for, that I could get in that situation so you would understand what was going inside of me that I couldn't show you. I was incapable of showing you. I didn't know what it was. Sobriety was good. I had a lot of fun. Through Eskimos, I became a television writer when I was about 5 years sober, which you hear my educational background, so you know what a miracle that was. I'm one of these people that is extremely grateful for computers that spell. Now I no longer have to pay someone to fix it for me. Made a lot of money writing for television, you know, kept going to meetings, kept sponsoring people, kept, unfortunately, getting married, too. I was going through lives with a rather Well, with a frequency that would have frightened anybody that had any mental health, but all the people around me didn't have much more than I had, so it didn't scare them any more than it scared me. By the time I was 17 years sober, I'd been married 5 times, 4 times in sobriety, once drinking and using, and at that point the one drinking and using had been the longest of the 5 marriages. Which is an indicator of the anesthetizing properties of alcohol and drugs, on me anyway, perhaps not on anyone else. I rolled into I'd done everything AA had asked me to do. I wrote my inventories. I just did everything AA asked me to do. This is a beautiful, powerful program. But 17 years clean and sober, I'm in the middle of my 5th divorce. I'm living in a penthouse at the beach in Santa Monica, California. I've got this gorgeous young girl living with me. I'm a writer on a hit TV show, staff writer, making a ton of money, driving expensive cars, living in this great pad. I mean, you could have used me as a poster child for AA, you know. Look at this boy from the streets with no education, you know, can't spell, failed English ever since they started giving it to him. They threw him out of high school in the 10th grade. Addict, alcoholic, just basically a worthless human being, and look at him. He's writing television, making a lot of money, got all these gorgeous women, his life was beautiful. And I was fine like everybody else on the surface. Had only one major problem. Every morning when I woke up, the only alternative I could think of that would save me from that day would be to die. Every morning, death seemed to be like the best option. Certainly not getting up and going out into the world with the kind of pain I was carrying. I had done everything that I knew how to do, and I know I needed more, and I knew I needed to do something else. And so at this point, 17 years clean and sober, I decided to go see a therapist. Now, for any of you here who are constantly holding the big book up and pointing at it, saying it's absolutely the only thing in the world that you ever need, you're right. But I wish to Christ you to read it through from cover to cover. Because the same people that seem to have a necessity to say that are also the same people that seem to go completely nuts when somebody they sponsor steps outside and goes and sees a therapist. I heartily suggest you read page 132 or 133 of your big book where it urges us to seek outside help. It tells us a lot of good help is available. So you might want to just consume that information because it is in the critical first 164 pages of the big book. I know you guys will find a way to cut that part out at some point, but don't, if you touch it, I got you. The minute you tamper with one word in that first 164 pages, you're mine. I can change it all then. I go to see this woman, I sit down in her office, she looks at me, she says, start with your childhood, tell me a little bit about yourself. I said, well, when I was 15 years of age, man, they threw me out of Reese High School. I discovered the world of drugs and alcohol. Spent the next 11 years drinking, using, bringing drugs in from Mexico. And at 26, I rolled through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous. I've been sober for 17 years. She says, I said, start with your childhood. You weren't born at 15. I said, I don't remember any of it. And then she got this weird smile. By this point in my life, I'm highly cynical, believe me. And she looks at me with this funny smile, and I thought the smile was that when I left the office, she was going to call the Rolls-Royce dealer and tell him she was going to take the one with a full leather interior. Because she had this guy who was about to pay for it. What I didn't understand with that smile is what she was trying to say to me is if you've got the courage to stick this out, I'm going to be here when you meet the man you really are as opposed to the man you believe yourself to be. I didn't know that's what was on her mind. I wasn't capable of thinking things like that or feeling things like that. It was beyond me. I had the courage and I stuck it out. We did it. Probably the most pain I've ever been in my life. Because I had to go back and dig up the stuff I've been running from since I was a little tiny boy. I had to get to what it feels like to be 3 feet high at 2 years old and have somebody 5'4", 140 pounds standing over you, beating you half to death. I had to feel that for the first time in my life. I had to cry those tears, and I had to scream that anger. It took me 3 years in therapy to scream. 3 years. I grew up in a house where if you weren't quiet, you were in major trouble. As a grown, sober adult in AA, living alone, I would still tiptoe through my own apartment. I'd get up in the middle of the night to go get a tab out of the refrigerator, and I'd tiptoe in the kitchen, open the door only about that wide. You know, just enough room to get in and get the can without letting the light out in the room. Close the door, and I'd muffle the top of the can with my hand and pop it so as not to make a lot of noise. This is I'm living alone. I'm a grown adult male living alone. And I'm still so terrified of waking the sleeping giants. Some piece of me inside that is controlling my life sober in AA. Okay. That's what I started to get, is that things were controlling me and I didn't know what they were. I had to cry the tears I hadn't cried. I wasn't a crier. Man, you could do the worst to me, and the one thing you would not see would be a tear. It just wasn't going to come. So I had to do this work. I had to dig these things out. And basically what it is this. If I can put it simply, at one point my sponsors came up to me, and it was time for me to do the amends step. And you'd have to read my inventory to understand what a nightmare the thought of doing amends was to this little group of people that I had written about. And it was basically the premise at the time, and it was said a lot at meetings, and I've heard it recently at meetings, that the ninth step is the step that separates the men from the boys. This will be the most critical step in your recovery. This is the one that will set you on the path to freedom forever. This is critical. You go back and make amends for the consequences of your drinking and or addiction. I buy that. I support that. I really do. I think that's an absolutely true statement. That's a sucker. That step is a killer. Because the only people I'd heard talking at that point at meetings had a good experience with it. You know, they went back and talked to people that were happy they had recovered. I went back and talked to people that were sorry I wasn't dead. You know, they were upset I had found a program of recovery, man. That was like they just didn't even want to conceive of me having a life of any kind. So it wasn't the warm spiritual experience that I had been listening to from the goddamn podium. It was a nightmare going through the streets with this stuff. Well, basically all then that happened to me when I went through therapy at 17 years sober was I had worked my AA program, I had done my steps, I had gone to my meetings, I had carried my panels, I had sponsored people, I had written my inventories, and I had dealt with the consequences of my addiction and my alcoholism. At 17 years, I went in another set of trenches over here, and what I did is I set it up to a point where I got it, that there was consequences to the behavior of the people in my life when I was a child. Now, for those of you who do not like it when somebody starts to talk about what happened when they were children, we have a statement from General Service that says the only thing you can share at this meeting has got to be related directly to your alcoholism. Doesn't say drinking, it says your alcoholism. I think that's one of the cleverest pieces of writing they've done in years in General Service in New York. Because I've got it, either they're dumber than hell or they're really bright, one of the two, because inherent in that statement is this: I am the only living human being in any AA meeting at any time, anywhere on the planet that is qualified to make the determination whether or not what I'm sharing about has to do with my alcoholism. I'm the only one. I can be talking about my parakeet's diarrhea, man, and you know, you may not want to hear that, but you don't know my affection for this parakeet and the kind of emotional trauma I'm going to go through if this bird dies. You see? I'm the only one. And so what I had to get at was that there was consequences as to what was done to me as a boy. That these things shaped my life and shaped my sobriety. I'm not, people say, oh man, he's out to destroy AA. I'm not out to destroy AA. I'm just out to share my experience, strength, and hope. What am I saying basically? What I'm saying basically is I needed more tools. Well, are you going to dispute the effectiveness of them? I don't think so. I stand before you 33 years clean and sober in great health with a super life. You know? A super life. And pain, still a lot of pain in recovery. I've just recently gone through divorce and separation, and I'm now a visiting father to my daughter. I hate it. I absolutely hate it. It is the one role I never ever saw myself playing with this child who I love so much. I never believed that I would be a visiting dad. I work at home most of the time, so I was there almost every morning of her life. When she woke up, I was there. I'm not there now. Causes me a lot of pain not being there. I also have to remember when I get into the pain of not being there, I'm the one that left. I had to make a choice as to what message I wish to convey to her. So it's not all, fine. It's just not all fine. The pain of being a visiting dad was so severe that the first time I picked this child up for visitation a few months ago and dropped her off at the end of the first day. I was in California, my family's in New Mexico. I went back to New Mexico, I picked my daughter up, I spent the day with her, and then I dropped her off. And I pulled around the corner and I sat in my car and I wept. And it was the first time in 32 years that I had, at that time, 32 years, that I had ever thought about medicating my pain, sober. I didn't think about drinking and using. That wasn't even an issue. That hasn't been an issue for 15 years. Didn't think about drinking and using. Never crossed my mind. I mean, I know a dozen psychiatrists on AA. I would have called one of them up and said, I need a break here, man. I just need 10 days. I can't do this. I cannot live with this pain. I need a break here. The thing I know what to do when I'm at that level of pain is surrender. And I surrendered and went back to my friend's house where I was staying. And I was just about as, I can't even describe the pain. I walked into the house and lo and behold, one of these 12 psychiatrists was sitting right in the living room. He was there visiting his German Shepherd puppy. I said, come with me, Earll. I need to talk to you. Downstairs. We went downstairs and I just sat and talked to this man and I just cried and screamed and yelled and talked about the anguish of having to give this child back. I'm not going to be there in the morning when she wakes up. I mean, it just killed me. When I got all done, he talked about being sober and having my daughter 7 and about having a little boy 8 and being in an adversarial divorce with his wife. And he'd drop his son off and he'd go about 2 or 3 blocks away where he lived in his own apartment. And he'd sit in his apartment and throwing up was about the only thing he could think to do to relieve the pain. It was so great. Thank God we progressed, many people in AA, to the point where when you're in absolute crisis, you can find somebody that'll sit there and instead of lecturing, you say, let me tell you how bad the pain was for me. Instead of giving you a long line of cliches or, lectures, they say, let me tell you about my pain. Let me tell you how awful it was for me in that situation. The way I work my program and the way the friends that I hang out with, we work our program. If you come to me with a problem I've never experienced, I'm going to find you somebody that experienced it. I'm just not going to give you some bullshit information that's got no reality for me. I'm going to find you somebody that can say, let me tell you what it was like when I was a visiting dad. Let me tell you what it was like when I lost my license as a doctor. Let me tell you what it was like when they disbarred me. I mean, I don't know what the circumstances are, but I got no business talking to you about that. I don't know what the hell it feels like. You say, well, it's not about feelings. Oh, yeah, it is. Oh, yeah, it is. If you remember when I started talking at the very beginning of this talk, I talked about the magic. My first encounter with alcohol changed my feelings. I bet it changed the feelings of almost everybody in this room, the first encounter. And yet, that may be the last time you've ever talked about feelings in recovery or anybody else around you. Does that somehow not seem logical to you? That the first time you drank it altered your feelings and yet you're in recovery and now you're not talking about feelings? What the hell do you think is going to make you go out and drink again? I know what's going to make me go out and drink again. When the emotional stress gets so bad I can't stand it. When the emotional pain is too much for me, I'm gone. It's not about losing jobs. It's not about losing wives. It's not even about losing my daughter. It's not about any of that stuff. It's not about getting the sickness. It's about when the emotional anguish in my being becomes too much for me to bear. And we're all individuals on this one. You may be able to bear what I can't. And that's where we got to stop the judgment stuff. It doesn't mean I'm stronger or I'm weaker. It just means that I'm different. And there's a place for all of us here. But I know that if I don't take care of my feelings, if I don't get to my feelings, I'm out of here. I'm going to be cooked. Because as they just kept building up and building up and building up over the years, it just kept building more pressure and more pressure and more pressure. and then it comes out sideways. It comes out at people that don't deserve it. The poor girl at the dry cleaners. The guy who doesn't use his turn signal. I don't know who, but it comes out sideways at your children, at your spouse, at your boss, at your employees. The people that don't deserve to catch it, they catch it because you're not dealing with the stuff that's really grinding you down. So, when you talk about preserving our fellowship, I would like to preserve a fellowship that is inclusive, that includes people and includes ideas, not exclusive. I don't want to be where when we're cutting people out and closing the door and saying, you can't talk and you can't. We don't have time for that crap. In case nobody's noticed, we're moving a lot faster than we were in 1935. The whole pace of society and life. The average newcomer coming in through the doors of AA today possesses more information about spiritual matters and emotional health than the guy 20 years sober had 20 years ago. Now, if you can get that, you'll get what's going on with AA today. People are coming through the door with more information. So what do? Tell them their information is no good? Tell them they don't belong here? Tell them don't share that stuff? Or try and find a way to take this information they're bringing and make it a positive and powerful part of our program. When somebody talks to me about being in deep therapy about interpersonal relationships, I say, then sponsor somebody. They go, huh? I say it's an interpersonal relationship. Think of all you can learn just by sponsoring somebody. And you can take that back to your therapist with you. It'll be a world of good. You'll save a lot of money. We'll shorten your therapy process 2-3 years here. Just sponsor somebody. Because all that stuff will come up sponsoring people. Do you ever notice how you give the really shit stuff to the people you sponsor you don't like? And when I was miserable, man, they took it. My babies really got it bad. I remember I must have put 100 babies on celibacy when I was in a bad mood, I'm not getting any. You haven't done anything to make me think you're wonderful lately. You ain't getting any either. God, if I'd had a knowledgeable person then, I could have talked to them about that. We could have really got to some stuff. I could have cleaned out some stuff and moved on down the highway of life. I won't work with people I don't like. I will not work with somebody I don't like. I was brought up in AA, did you sponsor anybody that asked you? Bullshit. I can't do it. I don't like you. I'm just not going to pay attention to you. No, it's true. I'm not a bad guy, but I just shut down. You start talking, I'm gone. I'm not hearing anything you're saying. I'm just not hearing it. A buddy of mine tests people at meetings. He's been a friend of mine for 20 years. Actually, he's my best friend. And he'll be talking to somebody, and he'll know they're not paying attention. He'll say something to him like, oh, yeah, and last night I killed my father at the parking lot at the Safeway. And then he'll go on with something else, and they won't even notice that he said that, There's a lot of self-obsession in this hallowed fellowship of ours, We don't hear it. So I got to sponsor people I like, because then I'll listen to them because I really genuinely care about what the hell happens to their life. So but maybe I'll give them to somebody I sponsor, or I'll find them somebody, But all this stuff works. I think there's a big fear here that all this new information, CODA, ACA, therapy, which they put in the book the importance of back in 1935, is somehow going to take away from us, or somehow hurt us, or somehow diminish the power of the fellowship. And all any of it can do is just add to us. The same, this is only my opinion. And don't get too crazy over my opinions, because I can change them on the plane on the way home. So you're up all night tonight completely nuts, and I'm on the plane tomorrow saying, geez, I don't know if I really think that's true or not. But in my opinion, the same loving God that sent the Eskimo to take me out of my doorway, and the same loving God that provided the girl down the hall that took me to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and the same loving God that had Joyce take me home from my talk 2 weeks sober, all these people provided in my life to save my life. The same loving God is the mind behind ACA, and the mind behind CODA, and the mind behind therapy, and the mind behind meditation classes, the mind behind dance and movement classes, the mind behind yoga, the mind behind the tools that will improve the quality of my life sober. Because I got news for you. If the quality of my life sober is good, I'm a happy camper. So what do I got to do to improve the quality of my life? And that's all I'm here to say to anybody. I will honor you in doing what you need to do to improve the quality of your life and your recovery. I think it's critical for us. I think it's critical for the example we carry to the outside world. I think it's critical for the example we present to the new people coming in today, because they got too much information. They want to have a life. Day one, they want a life. You know? I didn't have a life, didn't want a life, didn't give a shit. You tell me shut up for 90 days, I don't care. You know, I got nothing to say and I know it. They do have something to say. That probably would not hurt us too much to listen to them. I don't care if you want to do a 4 a.m. meditation class on trampolines down here at the park. You know? What does that matter? What does that matter if the person's sitting next to you? You know? We should be talking about nutrition in AA. It should be part of every meeting. We should have pamphlets on it. People go, oh man, God, what's he talking about? He's nuts. What has that got to do with anything? With their greasy french fries and hamburger. As they listen to this tape, you know? Well, hell, if I was to take and list all the accepted, recognized symptoms of low blood sugar here on this side of this wall, and then I was to take it over here, I was to write all the accepted, recognized symptoms of a dry drunk, I got bad news for you. They're identical. Wouldn't it be terrible if your emotional depression was not caused by the step you weren't working, but what you were eating? Oh my God, what a horrible concept that is! For many of us, it's true. For many of us, it's true. Yeah? Man, I'm going to be, let me think, this is October, November? The end of next month, the end of December, I'll be 60 years old. You know? This is not what I thought 60 was going to be. Believe me. Believe me. So I've learned to do these things. I've learned to be one of the guys that goes to the morning meditation class at 4 a.m. on the trampoline. Just try it out. I just try stuff out. You know, that's the downside of being stuck in your feelings, is that then you got to live a life that's either or. You know? It's either this or it's that. I was raised in a home. It's this or it's that. Nobody had any concept of gray. It did not exist. I never got it that you can just go try something and you don't have to do it for the rest of your life. You can just, oh, I don't like this. My not liking it was never reason enough to stop. You know? The organization would have to disband. And then I could stop. I now have permission to just try things out. So if you need permission from somebody, hell, I'm here to give it to you. I'll say it again because I think it's really important. If we want to preserve this fellowship, I think we need to put a lot of new stuff in the jar with it. It doesn't take away from what we have. It doesn't take away from the power of what we have. You know, I make a statement that really upsets people, but it's only mine for my own personal life. I would not go to a surgeon that the last book he read was written in 1935. Yeah? Now, I'm not talking about you or what you need to believe or anything. I'm just telling you about my own personal beliefs for my life. There's a lot of great information available to us now. And I just want to give those of you who need it. I just happen to be one of the ones who needed more tools. If you're one of the ones who has some pain and sobriety and you need some more tools, you're doing your work here, I just want to honor you in finding it, you know? And I think we can be even more powerful than we are, and more aware and more awake and move better. And it's by including people. It's about including ideas. We have it said in the book, Contempt Prior to Investigation. I mean, it's just like drilled home at a lot of meetings, and they read it with great emphasis. And they say, hey, how'd you like to come check out an ACA meeting with me? What do you mean, ACA? I rest my case. God bless you. Good night. Thank you.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with, and it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control is connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down. And then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.